We got another reaction by the man Echoes. They ignored the warning signs and this happened. Let's see what happened.
This photo captures David Potts enjoying himself near the Nakalele blowhole in Maui, Hawaii. At that moment, he had no idea that just seconds later, a single wave would turn his innocent scene into a truly shocking, irreversible tragedy.
Damn.
And the most disturbing part is that this accident, like the other 5 we'll cover today, could have been easily prevented if the warning signs hadn't been recklessly ignored. But first, as always, viewer discretion is advised. On July 9th, 2011, 44-year-old David Potts was vacationing in Maui with his fiancée, Tika Hick. The couple was preparing for an important step in their lives, Tika's upcoming double mastectomy for breast cancer. So that morning, they decided to spend some peaceful moments together before the surgery and visit Nakalele Point, a rugged lava shelf on the island's northern coast, famous for its natural blowhole. But beyond the beauty of the place, locals knew it as one of the most dangerous spots on the island, specifically because of the unpredictable rogue waves and powerful surf. Therefore, at the trailhead, authorities had placed a clear sign warning.
Bro, they ignored the warning signs and this happened. That's the title. What type of warning sign is this? This shit is trash. I wouldn't read this shit either.
And walk at their own risk. Yet the blowhole still attracted curious travelers, including the couple, who hiked down to see the natural wonder up close. When they reached the bottom, David immediately stepped closer to the opening, laughing as he moved in and out of the spray while other tourists snapped photos nearby. At one point, he was just a few centimeters from the hole itself, balancing on the wet rock as water shot upward with every incoming wave. But then, suddenly, a much larger surge slammed into the coastline, knocking David forward into the mouth of the blowhole. In an instant, he vanished from view, briefly appearing inside the column of water before the next surge dragged him completely out of sight. Panic erupted on the shore.
What's
David's
down there?
fiancée screamed for help, while others called 911 and scanned the water, hoping he would resurface. But the currents inside the blowhole behave nothing like open surf, since the narrow lava tube beneath the rock acts as a vacuum, compressing water and air and hurling them upward with enormous force, making it nearly impossible for anyone trapped inside to orient themselves or fight their way out.
No way.
Rescue teams from Maui Fire Services arrived within minutes and launched a coordinated search. Divers entered the ocean below the rock shelf, while helicopters swept the coastline looking for any sign of David. Over the next several days, crews scoured the surrounding waters using boats and rescue swimmers. But unfortunately, all their efforts were in vain.
At that point, like, why are you still looking for days? He's probably like, if he went days without like being seen, he's had no food, no water, he's probably gone. Like, why do they still look for people? I don't understand that.
Officials later explained that the blowhole connects to the open ocean through submerged tunnels, and anyone pulled inside is likely forced through these passages and carried far out to sea. Therefore, despite exhaustive attempts, no trace of David Potts was ever found.
Damn.
Shaken by the tragedy and heartbroken over the loss of her fiancé, Tika Hick eventually returned home to face her surgery. She successfully endured the operation and found the strength to keep living for their son, though her battle with cancer resurfaced in 2016 and again in 2018. A single ignored warning sign had led to an irreversible loss, a tragedy that could have been avoided with just a little more caution. And the next accident could have been prevented too, if not for one impulsive decision made 90 meters above the ground. On June 22, 2017, 17-year-old Victoria LaRocca was resting on a small blanket with her 2 friends at the closed Painted Rock viewpoint at San Francisco's Land's End, a scenic trail overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Several minutes earlier, the girls had climbed past a metal fence and walked beyond a red and white warning sign, hoping to enjoy the sweeping views of the rugged coastline and the Golden Gate Bridge up close. For nearly an hour, they sat together above the crashing waves, talking, taking photos, and watching the sun sink toward the horizon, only a few meters from the cliff's edge. At around 6:30 p.m., Victoria stood up to adjust the blanket, but as she stepped back toward the edge, she suddenly slipped. The girl plunged nearly 90 meters, striking the rocky slope before falling into the cold Pacific waters below. The impact left her unconscious, but still floating, carried by waves near China Beach. Victoria's friends immediately called 911, and since the cliffs were too steep for a descent, National Park lifeguards launched jet skis from a nearby cove and raced toward the base of the bluff, It took roughly 10 minutes to reach Victoria, and by the time rescuers finally pulled her from the water, she was still alive, but critically injured. CPR was performed as she was loaded onto a rescue sled and rushed towards shore. However, Victoria never regained consciousness and was pronounced dead en route to the hospital from the massive head trauma she had suffered during the fall. In the days that followed, the girl's classmates left flowers and photographs at the trailhead fence. A memorial was held at her school in Corte Madera, where Victoria La Roca was remembered for her kindness and love of adventure. And sadly, adventurous moments like these are exactly what lead young people to take.
That's what she fell off of? Hell no. Is the water like not deep enough? How did she not land in the water though and like stay alive? Bro, like why would you even get close to this edge? This shit looks scary as hell. I'm scared of heights. I wouldn't step fucking 1,000 feet near this shit, but I don't know.
Of risks.
Some people
However,
are
the
different.
next victims weren't teenagers at all, and yet their recklessness ended just as tragically. On July 19th, 2011, a church group of about a dozen friends and family members hiked Yosemite's Mist Trail, one of the park's most popular routes leading to the top of Vernal Fall. Among the group were three close friends, 22-year-old Hormiz David, 27-year-old Niños Yakub, and 21-year-old Ramina Badel, all part of California's Central Valley Assyrian Christian community, well known for hiking and outdoor trips together. By early afternoon, the group reached the top of the waterfall. The trail here ends at a metal guardrail with warning signs printed in multiple languages. If you slip and go over the falls, you will die.
Damn.
And indeed, Vernal Fall itself is nearly 100 meters high,
shit.
dropping straight into the Merced River, which at peak summer...
Wait, this place, this what? How do they pronounce it? The Yosemite, whatever. Isn't this where Yugi the bear lives? Or am I tripping? Or is that Colorado?
flow rushes with icy snowmelt-fed currents strong enough to sweep away even the strongest swimmers.
Damn.
Still, despite the warnings, the three decided to climb over the barrier to get closer to the water.
Are they dumb?
And while their friends and
They
nearby
fell off that?
hikers shouted for them to step back, the roar of the river and the excitement of the moment drowned out most of the calls.
Oh, shit.
The trio waded into the shallow water near the edge, taking photos and cooling off from the summer heat. Around them, the river looked deceptively calm. But moments later, everything changed. In an instant, Ramina slipped on the slick granite as the current caught her leg and pulled her downstream.
Bro.
Hormiz lunged forward, grabbing her arm, but the water's pull was too strong, and within seconds, both were dragged toward the edge. Niños rushed in after them, reaching out in a desperate attempt to form a human chain. The three struggled for balance in knee-deep water that moved far faster than it appeared. And then, in a single instant, the current suddenly surged again, and all three were swept over the lip of Vernal Fall in just
Bro.
seconds. The remaining members of the group immediately called for park rangers. Search and rescue teams closed the mist trail and began scouring the plunge pool and the river downstream. But due to the powerful current, the first recovery wouldn't come until 2 weeks later.
Damn!
when the body of Hormiz David was finally found. Nearly 5 months after the accident, Niños Yakub's body was located downstream,
The hell?
lodged in a debris field. And just days after Yakub's recovery, the body of Ramina Badel surfaced, finally bringing the search to its heartbreaking close. Unfortunately, all three had underestimated the danger of the waterfall, and ultimately died from drowning and blunt force injuries sustained during the fall.
Damn.
But water hazards aren't limited to powerful currents alone, since sometimes the threat comes from what lives in them. It was 2 a.m. on July 3rd, 2015, when 28-year-old Tommy Woodward was hanging out at the small bar at Burkhart's Marina in Orange, Texas. For hours, he had been drinking beer, playing shuffleboard, and laughing with friends. The mood was light, fueled by alcohol and the warm summer night. At some point, Woodward left the bar and stepped onto the nearby dock at Adams Bayou with his companion, 20-year-old Victoria LeBlanc, intending to go for a swim. As Woodward removed his shirt and wallet, bartender Michelle Wright ran out of the bar shouting,
Please do not go swimming. There's a bigger alligator out here.
What?
Just please stay out of the water.
and then she pointed toward a warning sign the staff had put up just days earlier after.
Bro, at this point, why do we still have alligators? Like, what are they useful for? They're damn near dinosaurs. Like, bro, all I see is them frying people. They don't do shit, like, nothing productive. Like, bro, why don't we just take them all out?
After spotting a
That makes no
massive gator
sense.
in the area. But Woodward, clearly tipsy and joking, gave a defiant reply that would later appear in nearly every news headline about the case. The alligators.
What?
Moments later, he jumped, Still, the man had barely swam a short distance when a 3-meter alligator lunged at him from the darkness, right before Victoria's eyes.
This
The
dumbass.
predator clamped down on his torso, severing his left arm and dragging him underwater. In a panic, she screamed for help and almost jumped in to try to intervene.
Hell no, don't jump
But
in.
Woodward shouted for her to stay back as the animal spun him violently in its notorious death roll. Hearing the horrifying screams, Michelle Wright grabbed a phone and called 911 as others ran to the dock with flashlights. Within minutes, beams of light swept across the black water, briefly catching the gator circling with Woodward's body in its jaws. However, by the
way.
time first responders arrived, there was nothing they could do to save him. At about 4:30 a.m., roughly 2 hours after the attack, deputies and Texas game wardens recovered his lifeless body, with signs of drowning and extensive trauma from numerous bites.
Damn.
This shocking accident...
Like, bro, these alligators don't even bite these people to, like, get a meal or, like, eat. Bro, they just kill them for the fun of it. Like, bro, if we don't, like, take these, every single one on Earth out, bro.
The first fatal alligator attack recorded in Texas in modern history. Unprecedented since at least the 1800s. And while gator sightings are common in bayous across the southern United States, fatal encounters are extremely rare, averaging about 1 death per year, or even less. The same, however, cannot be said about accidents on the road, especially when recklessness is involved. On the night of November 9th, 2024, 63-year-old Patricia Mahoney was driving along Interstate 40 in western North Carolina. The region was still recovering from Hurricane Helene, which had torn through the southern Appalachians just 6 weeks earlier, leaving entire sections of the highway collapsed into the Pigeon River Gorge below. For most drivers, the danger was impossible to miss. Barricades had been set up for kilometers in
She
both
drove through
directions,
that?
with large illuminated signs reading "Road Closed," and heavy cables stretched across the lanes. But at around 8 p.m., Mahoney's SUV reached the 11-kilometer marker and bypassed multiple barriers, heading straight toward the destroyed section of the road. And by the time she reached the 6-kilometer mark, the pavement simply ended, replaced by a jagged cliff where floodwaters had ripped the interstate apart. In an instant, her SUV broke through the final cable and, at full speed, plunged more than 30 meters into the gorge, flipping violently as it fell. A passing motorist who witnessed the crash immediately called 911. Within minutes, firefighters and rescue crews from multiple counties arrived at the scene. Rappelling down the steep embankment,
Damn.
they found Mahoney, still alive inside the crumpled vehicle, severely injured but conscious as they began the extraction. The rescue was extremely complex. Crews worked under floodlights, securing ropes and using hydraulic tools to reach her through the twisted frame. Once freed, Mahoney was placed in a Stokes
That's
basket
her?
and hoisted back up the cliff, where an air ambulance waited to transport her to Johnson City Medical Center across the Tennessee border. However, despite the rapid response, the traumatic injuries she had sustained during the fall were too severe, and unfortunately, Patricia Mahoney was pronounced dead later that night. Tragically, ignoring warning signs doesn't always come from carelessness. Sometimes it's a deliberate thrill-seeking choice, and that's exactly what led to the final accident on our list. On December 21st, 2006, 25-year-old Nicholas Blake Davidson headed out for what was supposed to be another day of skiing with friends at Snowmass Ski Area in Aspen, Colorado.
That's Colorado?
Another day of
Bro, this shit looks like Antarctica. No way Colorado looks like this.
skiing with friends
What?
at Snowmass Ski Area in Aspen, Colorado. And Blake was no novice, a sponsored skier known for taking on the mountain's toughest lines. He had lived in Snowmass long enough to know the terrain better than most.
Oh,
that
shit.
morning, fresh powder had blanketed the slopes overnight, and the resort was bustling with crowds eager to carve first tracks on the steepest runs. However, not all terrain was open. A section of the Hanging Valley Wall, known as Rayburn's Chute, a steep, ungroomed double black diamond, had been closed since the start of the season due to unstable snow conditions and a high risk of avalanches. Still, Blake and two friends reached that closure anyway. Brightly colored closed signs and
Come on,
ropes
bro.
clearly marked the entrance, but instead of turning back, they decided to traverse past them. The group hiked along the rocky ridge line until they reached a knoll overlooking the chute. Then, without hesitation, Blake launched himself off a 12-meter drop into the untouched slope below. And the
Damn.
moment his skis hit the snow, the mountain suddenly gave way.
What?
A slab of snow fractured above him and began to move as a single solid sheet, instantly accelerating down slope. Within seconds, a massive wall of snow roared into the chute, sweeping Blake off his feet and slamming him into the trees below.
Damn.
His friends, still on the ridge, could only watch as the avalanche buried him almost instantly. Ski patrol members riding the Elk Camp lift witnessed the slide from a distance and radioed for immediate response. Within minutes, patrol teams and an avalanche rescue dog were on scene, probing the debris field where Blake had disappeared.
Is that the real footage?
Although they located him quickly, by the time they finally dug him out, nearly 50 minutes had passed since the slide. The man was unresponsive, with his airway completely packed with snow. So despite frantic CPR and advanced life support efforts, Blake was pronounced dead at 1:59 p.m., suffocated by the dense snowpack that had buried him alive. Sadly, reckless behavior and underestimating danger often lead to tragedies like these. And unfortunately, there are far more of them than the 6 we've covered today. Warning signs, barriers, and fences exist for a reason, to prevent disaster, not to be ignored under the belief that it won't happen to me. So let me ask you, have you ever come close to ignoring a warning sign only to look back
Hell
later
no.
and realize how lucky you were? Just let me know in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for
Hey, that's gonna do it. Hey, be careful. If there's a fucking warning sign, it's there for a reason. Look at it, read it. We reacted to both these videos right here, the walked into a death trap and the dumbest deaths ever recorded. So if y'all trying to see that, those are up on my channels. But hey, with that being said, we's out of here.